Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is David and we have another shelf on the bookshelf tour. So this is going to be the final one, that back there behind me, where we wrap up science fiction finally and dive into fantasy, which is a much shorter quantity. This will take us through H. Um, yeah, I'm excited to get into this. I think one of my first things I'm going to be looking for once I get through this 100 book challenge in 2 years is to try to find a box or two, like I did with the science fiction, of just either vintage fantasy, Appendix N authors, or even early 90s epic fantasy. Just a bunch of mass market paperbacks and old paperbacks. I think those and ace doubles are two of the things I'm going to be looking for early on as a kind of a broad overview category of things I'd love to add to my collection and expand upon. But we have a couple more anthologies for science fiction to start us off, and the least of them certainly not being this Norton book of science fiction. This is an anthology with a ton of authors from 1960 to 1990. You've got a lot of science fiction in here. And I am delighted to eventually get to that. I'll be very excited. Then we have The Infinite Arena. So this is 7 science fiction stories about sports. And it includes in here a story by George R.R. Martin, I believe. Yeah. So it's got Run to Starlight by Martin. It's got a story by Arthur C. Clarke. It's got one by Poul Anderson and Gordon Dickerson. So it'll be interesting. Sports, sci-fi. Next we have Starships. So this is Climb aboard for a voyage you'll never forget. Stories beyond the boundaries of the universe. Isaac Asimov, Martin Harry Greenberg, Charles G. Wagg are editors. So we got lots of stories in here. Yeah, a good number of stories, including Asimov. We got Fred Saberhagen, Anne McCaffrey, Cordwainer Smith in here. So some good names in there that I'm familiar with. We've got Orbit 13. So this is edited by Damon Knight. It's most celebrated all original series in science fiction. So it'll be interesting. This has got a good number of stories in there as well. So I'm excited to get around to check out Orbit and see what that's all about and see if I need to pick up the other editions of Orbit. So this is The Circus of Dr. Lau, edited by Ray Bradbury. So a superb collection of weird and wonderful, assembled by a master of imaginative fiction. This book has seen better days. I mean, its first 20-some pages come right off. This one might end up having a page or two go into my junk journal when I'm done with it, and then recycled from there. We have Block and Bradbury, 2 finest writers of sci-fi and horror team up to give you this fantastic, frightening, and fabulous book. Okay, so it's actually it's a magnificent collection of science fiction and horror stories by 2 of the best writers. So this could have gone, I guess, with the B's, but that's okay. So it's got from Bradbury, The Watchers, Fever Dream, The Dead Man, The Handler. So I'm excited to check that one out at some point. And then 3 to the Highest Power. So it's got Bradbury, Oliver, and Sturgeon, some novelettes. So this is a new Martian chronicle by Bradbury, The Lost City of Mars. So I'm excited for that one too. Then we've got the most unique thing to bring the science fiction to the close. These are some analog science fiction from June 1976. October 1975. September 1974, March of 1973, and January of 1973. And I mean, I would love to pick up 3 science fiction bestsellers for 10 cents. You tell me where it's at, I'm there. So now we go into fantasy. And we start off with Lois McMaster Bujold, Paladin of Souls. I think I've read this a long time ago. And if I did, I remember really loving it. But I'm excited to revisit it if I have read it, or visit it for the first time if I have not read it. I have put this Burroughs volume in here, The Eternal Savage, New of the Neocene. Not sure why I put it here instead of with the rest of the Burroughs, but that's okay. Can diversify a little bit there. Next we have some Orson Scott Card, Alvin Journeyman. And then Seventh Son. This is Come Fall in Love with a Magical America That Might Have Been. That sounds really interesting. Then we have Revenant, Book 7 of Indigo by Louise Cooper. I mean, the cover looks interesting. A town without pity or humor or joy of any kind. I have a book that I may end up reading at some point in time this year alongside with Michael K. Vaughan, Lord Fowl's Bane by Stephen Donaldson. I've not read any of the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant the Unbeliever. And then one I also need to read, Gardens of the Moon. This is book 1 of the Malazan Book of the Fallen by Stephen Erickson. And yet another that I'd like to read at some point in time, although this is book 2. This is Rise of a Merchant Prince by Raymond E. Feist. Book 2 of the Serpent War Saga. I need to read some Feist at some point in time. We have Path of Honor. This is by Diana Farrow Francis, author of Path of Fate. So I imagine this is probably a book 2 in a series. We have The Warlord, Badland. This is number 3 in a Savage Saga of Survival by Jason Frost. It's cataloged as Men's Adventure. So yeah, we'll see. California, cut off from civilization after the apocalypse, rests its last hope on the razor-sharp arrows of the warlord. Sounds like some pulpy stuff. And then a fantastic book, David Gemmell, Legend. Eventually I will pick up more Gemmell to continue that series. In about 68 books, something like that. Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne. I still haven't read this. I still haven't read anything John Gwynne. I fully expect that this is going to be exactly my kind of book. I mean, look at the size of that dragon compared to the size of the person. Its tooth is about the same size as the person down there. Next, we have Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, Farseer. So this is book 1 for Fitz. Richly detailed debut, highly recommended. I mean, I would highly recommend this as well. It's fantastic. The trilogy is fantastic. And then we have book 1, Ship of Magic. This is book 1 of the Life Ship Traders series, which follows the Farseer trilogy. I read this end of last year and then start of this year, this whole trilogy, and absolutely enjoyed it. The other 2 books in the series I had physical copies of, but they were thrift books, kind of beat up mass market paperbacks. This one is not so much, so I kept this one. The other 2 I've passed along with the intent of getting them in better condition at some point in time. And then Fool's Assassin. This is book 1 of Fitz and the Fool trilogy, which is the next trilogy that I need to read from Robin Hobb. So I'm excited to get around to that. Although I'm debating on going back and doing Royal Assassin and drawing a blank on the third title of the rest of the Farseer trilogy, rereading that because it's been a long time. Then we have The Coming of Conan the Cimmerian by Robert E. Howard. This was a very close contender for being my favorite read of last year, which means that when I get around to The Bloody Crown of Conan and The Conquering Sword of Conan, I fully expect both of those to be in contention for 2022. And I do intend to read both of those this year. And to get, there's a whole bunch of Robert E. Howard volumes like this. I only have the 3 Conan ones. I fully intend to get all of them at some point in time because I'm yet to be disappointed by a Conan story. The closest came with the 3-Bladed Doom, which was certainly not much in the way of fantasy. But Worms of the Earth, which I read earlier this year as well, fantastic. The short story Worms of the Earth is great, and it was probably my favorite in here, followed closely by The Dark Man, which was the last one in this collection here. Bran McMorn, I think, is going to be a character I'm going to absolutely love. Then we have Child of the Grove by Tanya Huff. And then The Last Wizard by Tanya Huff, which I believe I had quite a few Tanya Huff sci-fi. Okay, I was just looking at the start of my next shelf to make sure I didn't have more Huff that wrapped around, but I don't. The next up is Martin. So there you have it. There's the start of the fantasy. I'm excited to. We're on the cusp of March. I've got another chapter of Fellowship of the Ring that I should be finishing today. And I've got one more story from the Noble Acts of King Arthur and His Knights that I'm hoping to finish tomorrow. And then I'll have gotten through, surprisingly, everything that I had tried to squeeze into February, minus one book for February fantasy stories, which I knew going in was going to be bottom of the list. So yeah, I'm excited to reach March to where I'm just blowing everything open. Anything I want to feel like picking up, I'm going to at that point in time. And it's going to be delightful. And hopefully I'll make some huge progress and get a little bit closer to being able to get off this book buying challenge. So I hope you have a great rest of your day. And yeah, if you haven't started doing your library tour, please do. I'd love to see what is in your collection, to hear about what you've got, why you picked it up. Most of these, there's still some of them. A lot of these mass markets, like the Tanya Huff and everything, the Robert E. Howard ones, the small volume paperbacks, all came as part of those sci-fi mixed boxes where I had way too much sci-fi and then a couple of fantasy ones that trickled in. Yeah, let me know what's on your shelf. I'd love to see it.